Welcome back, everyone. We are in our final session for today, and I am honored and pleased to have Erica Stick with us today from Chiesi. And Erica is a patient services director for rare disease at Chiesi USA. She has over 20 years of pharmacy experience and almost 9 years focusing on rare disease specialty pharmacy. And prior to joining Chiesi USA, Erica was an operations director for a specialty pharmacy focusing on building patient support service programs for patients with rare diseases. Erica has a passion for improving the lives of patients with rare disease and considers herself extremely lucky to be able to work closely with patients and families to ensure the services are making a difference. Erica, it is an absolute honor to have you here. Thank you for coming and participating.
Absolutely. So I wanted to say hi to everyone. A couple small housekeeping things. My ear keeps clogging, so if I kind of do this or kind of lean over a little bit, I'm not having any issues medically. And also, the kids are going to be getting off the school bus, so I might have to mute while my dogs just make sure that they stay out of our yard. So I'm going to apologize for that. But again, that's the virtual world that we live in when we work from home these days. So as Jeff explained, I've been working with rare disease specifically for about a little over 9 years now. And when I first started, I made the switch from a retail pharmacy, typical to what you see in grocery stores, Walgreens, CVS, your corner grocery store pharmacy type place. And I started working in a specialty pharmacy that was specific to patients with rare and ultra rare diseases. And I think within that first week of actually talking to patients and talking to caregivers, it went from a job to, okay, this is my career. And then, okay, this is my passion. So I absolutely love working in this space. It's truly amazing. So, I think it's safe to assume that many patients with a rare disease are on some type of specialty medicine, a specialty medication that you can't just go to Walgreens and pick it up, or you can't go to your medicine shop, local pharmacy, and pick it up. It has to be streamlined through a specialty pharmacy. And I know at first that probably seems like it's tedious. It's not really efficient for anybody, but there are reasons why it really works out best. It really helps doctors and patients streamline the onboarding process, as well as getting access to the medication. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I want to call out that a really good patient services program will help patients and caregivers through any financial, physical, and some of the emotional challenges that they face as they deal with the management of their rare disease therapy. As I said, I've worked in many different rare disease programs. I was with a company called Eversana prior to joining Chiesi. And so I think there I worked on probably about 10 different pharmacy programs I helped build. And I'm talking about patient populations ranging from, I think the smallest one that we had at that time was about 90 patients in the US with the diagnosis, up to the biggest one that we had there was 5,400 patients. So that's kind of where I'm talking. It can be ultra rare, ultra orphan type disease states, all the way up to some that are still very rare, but a little more common, a little more known in communities. So I know that, a lot of you probably have worked with specialty pharmacies, and a lot of the specialty pharmacy patient support programs, they do have your standard offerings. And when I say standard offerings, I mean like a copay assistance program, a patient assistance program, like a free drug type of program for patients who are uninsured or underinsured, as well as, the direct shipment, so shipping directly to the patient's home. And those are pretty standard across the board. But where I think some of the better patient services programs really come to play are the ones that go above and beyond that. And it can really depend on the type of medication, on what kind of additional services are needed. So, when I talk about what type of medication, I'm talking about, patients who have to do infusions, whether it's home or in a facility, they might need some additional nursing support. If it's a patient that has to inject a medication at home, or if they have to go to a doctor's office, there's a little different type of support that patient needs as well. And then it can also be just your standard oral tablet that maybe a patient has to take 4 or 5 tablets 3 times a day. Now, I personally never remember my allergy pill once a day. That's kind of why I'm pulling on my ear. But, there's a lot that plays into this for patients. And what you really need to do when you're building a patient support services program or even looking at one you currently have, because there's always ways to make it better, is you really need to look at the patient and talk to the patient, get their advice, say, hey, what can we do to help you? And I'm going to encourage everybody on this call, if you are a patient with a rare disease, if you are a caregiver of a patient with a rare disease, be vocal. Don't hesitate to let us know what you need. We might not be able to do it with government regulations, but be vocal, let us know, and we'll try to figure something out to help. But one thing that I've seen, or a couple of things that I've seen that have worked really well in the past, and this is kind of what we implemented when I was at the specialty pharmacy. Number one is that dedicated case manager. And now this title can change depending on which specialty pharmacy you go to. I've seen them called patient service coordinators, case managers, I think patient care liaisons. All of it's pretty much the same role. So it's going to be that person at that specialty pharmacy that the patient and the caregiver talk to every month to coordinate the shipment. It's going to be that person that works with the doctor's office to make sure that there's a valid prescription on file, works with the doctor's office to make sure that the prior authorization is approved and ready to go prior to every shipment needing to go out. But what I've always done in the past and what I've seen work really well is it's a dedicated person. So when you call the specialty pharmacy, you don't call and talk to Brenda for copay assistance. You don't call back and talk to Susan for the prescription. You don't call back and talk to Tom to get the shipment coordinated. Everything goes through this one person. And why I feel that works really well is it allows the patient and the caregiver to create a type of relationship to where they see this person as more than just somebody that calls me every month, coordinates my shipment, and moves on down the line. It's somebody that they can really look at as an extension of their care team. And that's made a huge difference in the patients that we've worked with. Because I mean, no one wants to call and go through an IVR, press 1 for this, 2 for this, 3 for this. Our phone lines are answered live by a person every single time. There's really no wait time on that. And one little story that I can share about that and why I think, it really does help create that relationship. When I started in the specialty pharmacy in 2013, I think, 2013, I started working as a patient service coordinator in that type of role and getting to know the patients and talking to them. I had a patient that with a disease state I was working on, they were told they would probably never be able to have children. Well, I remember getting a call from this patient saying, guess what? I got married. And then a couple of years down the road, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. And then sending pictures when that baby was born and that healthy baby was born. It's that kind of relationship you build. To this day, I'm still friends with her 9 years later. Another patient, same situation, was one of the first patients I worked with as a patient service coordinator, and I got invited to their wedding in Baltimore just a year ago. So it really is about creating that relationship, because as a patient services team member, you want the patients and the caregivers to know that you're there for them. You will do everything in your power to make sure that they have access to the medication and that they're able to ship on a monthly basis. And that if they have any questions that need a pharmacist or a nurse, they can connect them, but it's that dedicated person on that team that makes a lot of the difference. Another thing that's really important, as we all know, especially talking about medications, is the pharmacist. So having not just set hours where a patient can call in and talk to a pharmacist, with some of these specialty pharmacy programs, it's not like your typical pharmacist at, and I keep saying Walgreens because that's just a company I think everybody knows. But, a pharmacist at your Walgreens on the corner has to know all the drugs. These pharmacists at these specialty pharmacies, they are highly trained and highly educated on the specific specialty pharmacy medication. So they know the ins and outs of that specific drug that the doctor has prescribed for you or your healthcare professional has prescribed for you. They know the disease state. So they are there to really answer all of your questions. Now, don't get me wrong, they're pharmacists by trade, so they have the training on the other medications to check, make sure that there's no issues with, taking multiple products. But they're really the experts when it comes to this drug. So what we've always done is we've had a 24-hour on-call pharmacist, so that if you have a sick baby in the middle of the night, you can pick up that phone and reach out to that pharmacist and get some assistance. It's not just the hours from 9 to 5. This pharmacist is on call at all times. And it's really made a huge difference helping the patients and helping mitigate any potential adverse events or, anything from getting worse. I know that doesn't sound good, but, by being able to talk to that pharmacist, it could prevent an accident from happening when taking medication. One thing that we've really started growing, and it's not just us, I think it's across the business, is more of a nursing support. So the nursing support can definitely vary depending on the type of medication, again, as I mentioned. But what I like to have on a team is a nurse educator. And this nurse educator can really help the patient and the caregiver navigate through any type of lifestyle changes. They can help provide emotional support to patients and caregivers, and they can really help provide some disease state education. I think another thing we all know, not just in rare disease, but no two patients are the same. The needs are not the same for every single patient, even in the same disease state. It really varies. And what I like about this role is they can really help, like I mentioned, navigate through lifestyle changes. Because if there's any caregivers on the call, what you need for support when you have a newborn baby diagnosed is a little different than what you need for support when that baby is 5 going to school for the first time. A little different than what that parent and that caregiver needs when the child's a teenager. And we all know how fun teenage years can be. It's very different also, when you're talking about your child going off to college for the first time and not maybe being at home. So you can't be with them every minute of the day and make sure that they're taking their medication, making sure they're following a set diet if that's needed. So, these nurses are really good to help throughout all phases of life. Same thing for the patient. What we see right now, and I think it's something that if anyone here can solve this problem, let me know and I will help you get it patented. But, the transition from pediatric care to adult care, when you're a child born with a rare disease, you work with your pediatrician or your pediatric specialist, and it's a totally, this is what I've heard from patients. So it's a totally different experience because I'm not going to use the word coddle, but there's more high touch, more warm touch, maybe in those clinics. You're around other kids, it's kind of like a little community. And then all of a sudden, if you age out, like they do in certain hospitals, you go to an adult clinic and it's completely different. And then, all these clinicians are coming to you for answers that your mom and dad might have taken care of before. So, that nurse can really help with that transition as well. One thing that we can do, we have a product right now that's an injectable product, and it can be injected either in the home or at a doctor's office, should the doctor prefer it that way. But what we can do is we can have a field nurse, so like a home health type nurse that we're contracted with, go into the home and help coach the patient on doing their injections. And that doesn't have to be, at the age of transition to adulthood. It can be if the caregiver wants the child to start doing their own injections at age 13 or 14, just to start getting them a little more independent. We can have that nurse go into the home and help with that training and kind of coach them until they're comfortable with it. I always used to joke that my mom's a nurse. And if I had to do injections, even with my mom being a nurse and having done it for years, I wouldn't want her to tell me how to do it, especially if you're a teenager. So by having that nurse come in, it's just like a different layer of support, a different person to really help coach you through. We also have nurse coordinators that can help for our infusion patients. So some patients, might be eligible to infuse in the home, and some might have to go to a facility. So what these nurses can do is they can help take the burden off of the patient trying to find a local facility to do an infusion, trying to find a home health nurse to come in and do the infusion. This nurse coordinator will take care of all that. They'll find a facility or a nurse in the area that is in network with their insurance plan, and then they'll help coordinate the visits, ensure that the product is delivered along with any supplies needed, ensure that all of that is delivered so that hopefully the only thing the patient really has to do, and that's across the board with all the products I've ever worked on, is answer the phone and say, yes, I'm ready. Or yes, this date is perfect for the infusion. Everything else is taken care of by the patient services support team. And again, that's so helpful because it's like, we know this one medication is not the only thing going on in the patient's life. It's not the only thing that the caregiver has to worry about. There's other children, there's, maybe sporting events, there's school, there's maybe a sick kid, there's rowdy dogs. There's so much going on with life in general. A good patient services support program will do everything they can to make sure that access to the medication is something that patient and caregiver never has to worry about. There's a lot of support service programs now that offer mentorship programs to where maybe, a parent, a caregiver, or a patient who's been on the therapy for a while is willing to be a mentor for maybe a newly diagnosed patient or a caregiver, a parent that has a brand new diagnosed baby. And it's a way that the care team can, with the right consent, connect the two so that, it can be just one mom having a call with another mom saying, how did you manage this? This is what we're going through. Do you have tips? How did you manage this? Or even just reaching out and needing a shoulder to cry on from time to time, just that additional support. And then another thing that they also do is a lot with patient advocacy. So working with the patient advocate foundations, connecting patients to the patient advocate foundations, just to provide some of that additional support that doesn't come from a specialty pharmacy or a support service program, helping them attend conferences. Because sometimes what you'll see is there's a rare disease patient or a patient with a rare disease in Indiana. They don't know anybody else with that same rare disease. So it's a way to connect them so they feel a little less alone in the world, and then also have somebody, like I said, to contact, to reach out to talk to get additional information. Connecting these healthcare providers if they're not familiar with the disease state. They have one patient with this specific disease state. Connecting them with other professionals that maybe have more patients with it in a bigger clinic in the city. Connecting them to provide education to each other. That's something else that a lot of patient support service programs can do. And then, always changing and looking for ways to improve. And I know that I mentioned that a little earlier, that if you're asked to participate in an advisory board, or whether it's from the pharmaceutical company, whether it's a patient advocate foundation, just attend. If you don't feel comfortable talking, just attend and listen. But I really encourage you to speak out, because it's your voice that creates these programs and makes them better. I don't have a rare disease. I am incredibly lucky. So I can't sit here and say that I know all the answers. I know everything that patients and caregivers need. But what I can do and what I will do is listen, because your stories are what really makes the difference when it comes to these programs. And that's, yeah, Jeff, I was going to say, that's kind of my spiel. I know it's pretty fast. I probably talk too fast.
No, you're fine. That's excellent. Thank you for sharing those things. I do have some follow-up questions that we might get into the meat of some of those things, because one of the things that has come up with in a lot of our sessions, but it's been kind of surfaced, on the surface because we didn't have a specific session on it, is going from the guardianship part when your teen turns 18. And now I'll say this about, like with Cambria, Duke University or Duke Health, they started actually separating that process. And the reason that they do is it's an easier transition. But when a child turns 12, their MyChart actually disconnects from the parents. Now that makes it really tough for me as a parent, because we're highly engaged because she has a rare disease. So there's ways that I can connect to it still, but they don't even tell you they're doing it. They just, it's done. They turn 12, their 12th birthday, and all of a sudden they at 12. And I asked them, I said, why are you starting to separate that? And as interesting as it may sound, is that there are children now that are preteen that need to be able to confide in a medical provider privacy that they do not want their parents to know about. Okay. And yeah, it's a very interesting world. But let's talk about that. That's a totally different conversation, I think. Yeah. For that, because they are still under your care, but there is the whole patient privacy thing. But that transition, if they are in the middle of a trial or a study or something like that, and with your patient programs, and they are transitioning from being under the care of that uh, guardian, that adult, into their own realm, how do you guys handle that? I mean, and I know there's probably not, like you said, if there's a patent way to do it, would love to know, because
I know.
you have the human dynamic. And yeah, so how do you guys handle that?
Yeah. So what they'll do is, so it can go multiple ways. There can be some parents they remain hands-on throughout the lifetime of therapy. I can remember working with some patients who were in their 30s or 40s, and there was consent on file at the pharmacy where the patient said, go through my mom and dad for everything. They still manage everything for that, even adult patient. I think it's hard as a parent to let go of a lot of that. Now, I think 30 and 40 might be pushing it a little bit, but what can happen is we start to encourage the parents when the patient starts getting to an age. I'm not going to say 12, because to me 12 seems a little
Pretty
young.
young.
I know kids are a lot smarter these days than I was when I was 12, but I think that's a little bit. But when the patient starts getting about 15 or 16, engaging the patient in on the conversations with the pharmacy about the insurance, about shipping the product, about the disease state, about compliance and the importance of being compliant with these life-saving therapies. And then that way, a little bit at a time, the patient starts picking up on some of this. And then they start speaking the lingo. And then, mom and dad start to feel a little more comfortable and say, okay, I authorize you to just talk to my daughter, Judy, going forward to schedule shipments. Let me know, though, if she's not responding to any outreach, whether it's text, email, however you guys try to contact, and I'll follow up, or let me know if there's a problem. But start going through her so that she can be more independent and start taking over some of this and being more comfortable having those type of conversations. So that's really what we've always done at the specialty pharmacy, is not just kind of like cutting ties, or like, it's not a cold cut off. It's more like you kind of, I don't want to say groom them, because that sounds really bad, but you kind of ease them into making those adult decisions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I thought, well, both Eden and I, we've talked to Duke about it. So 12 just seems a little young, but they had to adopt that policy for other reasons that, and when he explained those reasons, I'm like, wow, okay. We won't get into that on this particular panel with it, but it was very, very eye-opening, because, Cambria is going to turn 13 in a few days, and that leaves us 5 years. And because of her rare disease, we have already started. We have her engaged. We have her talk, and with it. And we have a friend. Her son has a rare heart disease. But I will tell you that when he hit 18, he moved out, and he stopped taking his medication and just refuses to. And it's very, very tough.
I
Yeah.
sadly experienced that too. And it's like you mentioned earlier, the privacy laws, they're very important. They're there for a very important reason, but they can also make it very tough. So I've experienced the same thing where we've had a patient turn 18, and then we no longer have a HIPAA consent to speak to mom or dad for this patient. They quit calling back. They quit shipping. The doctor can't get a hold of them, and they kind of just sadly fall off the face of the earth, and from what we can see, until they've let it go almost too far, to where when they finally come back to therapy, the disease state has progressed so far that it's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I will say that one of the things we're trying to do with Cambria is that, and I do understand, because if you have a kid that has a chronic or a lifelong condition, they're tired of doctors. I mean, Cambria is 12. She's tired of doctors. They're tired of pills. They're tired of shots. You have poked me, prodded me, done everything with me. I just want to be normal. So I do get it. So it goes into the whole mental health portion, where you have to come up with ways to make this a positive thing. As part of your patient programs, that does lead me into my next question. As part of your patient programs, Do you offer any kind of medical type of mental health portion? And if a parent reaches out and says, I'm concerned, about this.
Yeah,
Uh,
right now, we don't, but we are currently looking at that because that is something that we have heard a lot, especially in the last almost 2 years of COVID. I almost said year, but let's be honest, 2 years.
it's 2 years
Um,
now, yeah.
we've heard a lot more from patients about just the mental breakdown and needing that mental support. We've heard it from, I was on a patient ad board for one of our disease states, and I cried the whole time behind the camera. Of course, they didn't see me, so I didn't make anybody feel bad. But talking about, just the stress, even between the parents,
Mhm.
parents are on the brink of divorce because it's all consuming. And it's talking, we need more emotional support. We need more mental support. So I know as an industry, that's definitely where we need to do better. And we are looking into that. Whether it's having maybe, and I don't know what it would look like because I don't know the compliance on that, but maybe having some type of therapist on the team or
Mhm.
having a way to connect a patient to a therapist, whether, like patient education liaison is a newer role in this industry. And we're looking at doing something like that, where this patient education liaison would be either a genetic counselor or have like an advanced nursing degree with experience in rare disease, but it would be more of a field-based role. So this nurse
Mhm.
with patient consent can travel to the patient's home, sit down with the patient and grandma and grandpa, aunt and uncle, the cousins, and explain the pedigree on this is what the genetic disease, this is what it looks like,
Right.
this is how you got it, and then talk about it so that child doesn't feel weird. There's
Mhm.
there's no mom gave it to me versus dad gave it to me. Just kind of setting everybody down and explaining it and providing some of that family type support. But I don't know how it's going to look with specific to mental health, but I do know that is a big thing that has been brought up a lot on some of the congresses that I've been involved in.
Yeah, it is challenging on that mental health front when you're talking about bringing in someone who or you get into the whole referral things. Most of them want to build an insurance, understandably, because that's how they get paid. But in order to do that, they have to have a referral, they have to have approval. I mean, it's a whole ball of wax that is a very challenging issue when we're talking about, that portion of that transition to it. We talked a little bit about compliance, and Eden and I have actually worked with a company local here in Raleigh, who is developing a device for uh, medication dispensal for clinical trials. And they're doing it largely in part to help with the compliance portion of their patient program. How do you guys track that compliance? What do you do to ensure that they are compliant?
Yeah, it's just a lot of it goes back to having that dedicated case manager and that relationship that the patient feels comfortable being honest with that person if they're not taking it. Because, there's a lot of patients that'll just say, oh, I take it exactly as you tell me, as I'm supposed to. Yes, send me a shipment. Then down the road, they have 5 FedEx boxes shoved under their bed because, there's obviously an issue. So a lot of it is, letting the doctor's office know, the healthcare provider know that if a patient's not coordinating shipments, because we do typically ship a 30-day supply at a time. So, if month after month, the patient, oh, I still have product on hand, that's a problem. So it's a conversation where the patient has to talk to either the nurse or the pharmacist and really get down to why they're missing doses. And then a lot of it is also, and this probably sounds bad, it's kind of like tattletaling to the doctor, because the last thing, we want is that doctor to do lab work and be like, oh, there's something going on, or having the patient disease state progress to a point where it might be too late to kind of reverse some of some of the issues going there. So a lot of it's conversation and education, just really
Yeah.
letting the patient know that if you don't take this pill, we'll just say pill, this is what the pill does. If you don't take it, this is how you're affecting your body and your disease state. I think there needs to be a push for a lot more education too, when it comes
Mhm.
to rare diseases and rare disease medications.
Yeah. Well, and I know that again, pulling from personal experience, you start them on a new med. So, we had this experience happen with Cambria. She was having some really severe headaches. We started her on a new medication. And, the doctor told us, said, well, it might cause some drowsiness. And we get a call from the school the next day. We were actually pinning an email. She's to take it at night, but she'd fallen asleep in class. you know, and it was during, they were watching a streaming thing, and they turned off the lights. And of course, we're very proactive. We go up and we talk about her adrenal insufficiency and what we need to do. And we only live a mile from the school, and so on and so forth. And and they were on the phone with us. They're like, something's wrong with her or something, this is going down. We're like, okay, no, it's all good. We're actually writing an email explaining that, this new medication could do this with it. But I know, given that, patients sometimes don't want to take their medications because, well, I feel fine, or it's not really making any difference. I don't feel any different.
Exactly.
I still feel the same way that I did, or I don't like the way it makes me feel. I don't like how I get dizzy, I get sleepy, I get sick to my stomach.
That's a common one.
So compliance is something that is, that can be challenging with it. Here's a question. In our conference this year, we have had a lot of people from the UK join us.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it has been really good with it. And we always have a good international presence, but this year has been a lot of UK presence that have come into the platform. With you guys, and we're talking about patient programs with stuff, do you guys do anything internationally? And I know I could say, well, go out and look at their website, but you're here, and to hear it from you.
Yeah, you're good. No, we do have some of our products are available overseas in Eastern European. The FairProx product, I think, is pretty much available almost anywhere globally, to be honest. But patient services, and this is where I'm kind of new to this, Jeff. So I've always focused on, working at a specialty pharmacy in the United States until I joined Chiesi, and we are a global rare disease business unit. So I'm learning more the longer I'm here. But what I've been able to figure out is patient services outside of the US is completely different. Like there's not a lot of it, to me, feels like it truly is just shipping the drug, getting the patient the drug. And then the healthcare provider, it feels like, does a lot of the management going forward. Like there's not a lot of communication with the patient. Like here in the US, we can get the proper consent forms. We can get the enrollment forms where the patients and caregivers are saying, yes, I want the nurse to call and check in. Yes, I want the nurse to help with this injection. Yes, I need this. But I don't feel like that happens globally. It almost feels like it's closed off for whatever reason. It's just, and again, I'm not an expert at all. So if anybody here on the UK, if I'm saying that wrong, please correct me. Like I said, my focus is really the US and Canada. And even in Canada, it's completely different.
Yeah.
How medications, specialty medications for rare diseases, are dispensed and what services you can provide. But it does feel like it's almost like a black hole. Like once you get the product to the patient, you can't really do much more.
Yeah, and I, because of that, we've had some of the UK participants talk about, especially when it comes to, well, and not just patient programs, but even like mental health, in that type of thing. It's very different than it is here in the States, even in the UK, and that we would think about. We also had a conversation with different countries, and some of the countries that aren't as advanced technology-wise, that patient programs don't even exist. I mean, they're just not there. With it. And we had a conversation with a group earlier today about that. And it is highly closed off. From it. So I was curious as to what you're able to do, and I know that very often it's a country by country, region by region type of a setting with it. I know you hit upon it a little bit, but one of the things I wanted to ask, and when you talk about the patient programs and seeing the patients, that first appointment though, first impressions, making a good impression, how critical is that first touch base with the patient? And in your experience, what is the best way to have that done? Is it in an office? Is it in their home? what is the best way? And of course, COVID totally threw that into, we're meeting like this, like we are right now. But as things change though, before and now going forward with it, what's been your experience with that very first appointment?
Very first contact with the patient. So from the specialty pharmacy perspective, it's always been a phone call, or now you can do video chats. That wasn't as easily accomplished back in the day, but it's always a phone call. And what the team does is they have an initial welcome call. So as soon as that prescription is received at the specialty pharmacy, they make contact with the patient within 24 hours. And that welcome call is really basically just that. It's welcoming that patient into the program, going over all of the services that are available to the patient, asking the patient if they have questions, letting them know next steps. Because I think one thing we all also know, and we probably all also don't like, is all the insurance authorizations that you have to get with some of these medications. It's not always as easy as my prescription comes in, it gets shipped the same day. Sadly, that's not the world that we live in with all the insurance company regulations. So it's letting them know next steps and creating that relationship if they have questions about the disease state, because there have been times when I would do these calls that the patient didn't know the doctor was going to send in a prescription for a medication. So it's, then you kind of step back a little bit and say, this is what the medication's for. Does that sound familiar from what you talked to your doctor? And then getting them to that nurse or that pharmacist to have a deeper discussion if needed. But I also am aware, especially, if it's a caregiver and it's a brand new diagnosed baby, because one of our disease states that's newer, there's 52 patients in the United States with this disease state. And it's diagnosed at newborn screening. So I can only imagine everything going through the heads of those parents, that they're not going to listen to half of what you say on a phone call. Their minds automatically shooting off in 500 directions, like, oh my God. So what they'll do is they'll also, follow up with an additional phone call just to give them some time to kind of regurgitate it, think it through. And then they follow up with a phone call and also send like a welcome kit that has that same information in it to the patient's home so that they can get it, they can read through it, they can look through it. And then, by the time the next call comes through, they maybe have had time, to think about it a little more and really be able to wrap their head around it. But it's definitely not easy because, the pharmacy is located in one spot in the US and patients are all over.
Yeah.
So it does make it harder, but that's where I think it does help having that one dedicated person that can reach out, because that as soon as Susie calls you, this is what it's about. Okay, this is where I get my questions. This is what I need to do, and just go over it all again.
Yeah. I did have another question about, from a patient standpoint, do you ever encounter with patient programs? I know there's HIPAA compliance. We sign the forms. We know about the protecting of that. But you're also filling out some information about some other stuff about your medical history and various things. Do you ever run into patients wanting to know what's happening to my data? Because in that patient program, what are you doing with my data? Do I have access to my data? Do I own my data? And we're getting those questions a lot more than we used to, from the community.
When I was working in the specialty pharmacy, I don't ever remember patients asking those questions. But then again, I'm trying to think back on some of the programs I worked for. Some of the consent forms were very specific. It's been almost a year, so I'm trying to look at it in my head. Very specific about, de-identified information can be shared with only, affiliates and certain vendors that are working on the program. And some programs didn't really share hardly any data at all with the pharma companies. Some pharma companies, I feel like, were just completely offhand, hands off. Like, just take care of the program, do what you got to do, let us know what you need from us, kind of thing. So I think it just really depends on who the pharma company is and what, the signed consent. If there's no signed consent, then there's nothing really that was shared with the companies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing and joining. I am going to open it up. We don't have any questions in the chat, but if anyone who has joined who's still on has any questions for us, this would be a great time to ask. I'll say that you can unmute, and if you want to turn on your video, you can. And if not, we'll wrap up this session for the day. Does anyone have any questions? I know I've asked a lot of questions, so there may not be.
I like questions. I like questions.
Yeah.
I prefer this kind of communication as opposed to me just reading through my notes and talking nonstop. No one wants to hear that.
Absolutely. And I think it's more beneficial. I think that, you spark thoughts and ideas that other people would have as well.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, Erica, listen, thank you so much for coming in and speaking. It has been it's been very informative. It's been very helpful. And thank you again for taking the time today to do it. And, we'll be posting the recording in the event space for people to watch if they couldn't attend. And we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you. Thanks to you and Eden for putting this together. I know it's a lot of work, so that's kudos to you.
Well, thank you.
Yes.